you're free to do so.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nishit. Hi, everyone. My name is Dina Levitan. I'm here from Seattle, Washington. I am co-organizing this session with Rana, who's also part of the Product Leader Summit community. So we're organizing this session to really spotlight the fractional product kind of career path that has been emerging in recent years. And we have three amazing panelists who we'd love to introduce. And then we have a few questions that we've prepared based on what the input you guys provided was on your registration form. And we'll leave some time for questions from all of you as well. So I'd love to turn it over for a 30-second introduction from each of our panelists. I'll turn it over to Ha.
Okay, well, hi, I'm so happy to be here, and thanks, Dina and Rana, for the invitation. So my name is Ha Nguyen. I have a fractional COO consulting practice. I have been at it for 3 years. I've been in Silicon Valley tech for 25 years. So I'll just leave it at that, and I'm excited to share everything that I've learned in the last 3 years of doing this, and it's been great. I'm really happy and living the dream. Uh,
Anything, Tommy?
Yes, so I'm Tommy, originally from Helsinki, Finland, but in New York City for the last 15 years. I've been building software since, the dot-com boom, the late 90s. And so I guess I'm aging myself there a little bit. I was an engineering manager, all that fun stuff first, and then moved my way to the dark side of product around 2011, 2012. Um, and we're, of course, here in the presence of Grandmaster Ha, who's been at this fractional thing for like 3 years, which is an eternity in the fractional space. I found myself into this game about a year and a half ago through a very similar session that Ha incidentally was a huge part of. It was kind of my last nudge into fractionaldom. So yeah, I've been doing this for now for like a year and a half, and recently found myself a little bit out of what I thought was my wheelhouse into the world of private equity. So that's been most of my last 9 months or so, trying to figure my way forward from here.
Thank you. And Prerna.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm Prerna. I run Scrappy to Scale Advisors, which is my fractional product practice that I've been running for the last, almost 2.5 years. And the common thread that we all have is that Ha was also kind of one of the catalysts for me moving into fractional after I left my last full-time job as the VP of product at Meetup. And in sort of the practice that I kind of work on, I work with high growth organizations and early stage founders to really help them understand how to tighten the feedback loop between customers and their product, and also focusing on coaching and growing product organizations. And more recently, given kind of the need, also been looking at how to drive thoughtful adoption of AI in ways that align with kind of what the organization and the culture needs are. And yeah, before this, I've been a product leader at a number of um, startups in New York City, and across a lot of different industries. And that's what I really love about being fractional is I get a chance to work across lots of different organizations. My biggest client right now is a nonprofit, but I also have been working with SaaS companies and a number of other clients. So that's been really fun. And yeah, I'm based in New York City.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all the panelists for being here and sharing your experience with us.
yeah, I think I'm gonna rebrand my LinkedIn to be like godmother of fractionals. So,
I would endorse that.
Yeah, I'll write a recommendation for you on that.
Aw, so sweet. Thank you, Tommy.
Amazing. So as I mentioned, we had an input form for this session today, and we gathered the topics that matter to you. Um, it was a running joke within the panel. For a while, BizDev wasn't the first on the list. We were very excited, but it is one of the top things that people think about as they enter the fractional world. So the way that we've structured this session is that we'll start with finding your niche, and then we'll talk about packaging your offer and going to market. Pass over to Rana.
Thanks, Dina. So glad to see so many folks signed up and join here, and our thanks to our amazing panelists. Today's agenda, we're going to spend meaty time, I'd say, on finding your niche. This is probably the most important thing when you're starting out as fractional. I am still trying to figure this out myself. And then the next thing we will dive into is packaging your offer. What value do you offer to your clients? And then how do you go to market is the third topic. We will spend 15 minutes or so on Q&A. These will be questions from participants that will get from Slido. And then finally end with some feedback and next steps. Dina and I will introduce ourselves more deeply and end with that. So with that, the Slido link has been shared in the chat, if I'm not wrong. And feel free to ask questions as we go along. And feel free to also vote on questions. And I will go ahead and ask the first question, which is finding your niche. Prerna, I'd love to ask you, how did you get started in like figuring out your super strength and really honing down on it?
Thanks for kicking it off. I'll say this. I think just to give some context, I think that what's interesting about I can't speak for everybody else, but like my journey into fractional was that it was kind of unintended. I think I had left my last job. I was coming off of maternity leave and ended up parting ways with my last employer and was looking to figure out like what I should do next. And in the midst of interviewing, I think maybe it was like some postpartum craziness. I was just like, I need to work. I need to do something. And so I took on my first client and just like wanting to do something. So that was kind of the context of like how I came into it. And then one client became two. And then suddenly I guess I was like, okay, maybe I should just stop interviewing and just do this. But I think in terms of like finding my niche, what I'll say is even my first client that I signed, it was kind of like accidental. Like I wasn't looking for work. I was still like actively interviewing for product leadership roles and jobs. And what I think like the way that I sort of approach it is kind of very much telling of my own background, which is in user research. And so what I love to do is just listen, like really try to understand like what are the pain points of the founder who is, this particular founder I've known for quite some time. And I was just checking in with him and he, I was just like, what is it that you need help with? Like, what's the top sort of priority? Who are you looking to hire? And what is like holding you back from success? And in just those questions and the answers that I was getting back with him, I was like, hey, like, I can help you set that up. Like I did that in my last ecom job. And he's like, oh, really? Can you do that? And I think what's really awesome about that is like I've had this relationship with him for a very long time, not in a very formal manner, but just in terms of like not approaching it from like, hey, I'm trying to sell you some work, but from a true kind of customer discovery lens of like, what is it that you're trying to like solve for? And then being like, oh, hey, I have done that. Have you tried XYZ? And even just trying to like offer some advice and some capability to the point where then the founder was like, is that something you can help me with? And I'm like, yeah, that is. So that's like, for me, that's what felt most natural and most organic and kind of the principle that I've taken throughout kind of selling and going through the process of BD is not, sort of approaching and be like, hey, my name is Prerna and I do fractional and like, let me help you. But really being like, hey, what's top of mind for you? Of course, it means that you need to have, some kind of network with founders or whoever it is that your target is. But what that's meant is that I've actually done a number of jobs now. Like it hasn't always been true product. It means like I've had a client where I was doing like customer success work and I was like, this is a cool area. I've never really tried it, but I've worked with customer success before. And now, I get a chance to like bring a product lens to customer success. I've done like e-com marketing, like marketing automation setup. I've set up Klaviyo and SMS and like lots of different things. That what's interesting is that over the course of my career, like I've done these jobs as part of being like part of product, and now I get to like take those experiences that I've had in the past and get to apply them to different projects that I'm working on with clients. So all of this to say is that like I know this is a little bit of like revisionist history or backwards, but if you're starting off, like my advice would be like really take stock of like what have you done before in your past roles, really understand like what has that meant for your own growth, and then really think about not trying to sell that first, but trying to listen and understand what your customers' problems are, and then see how you can apply those past experiences to helping them.
Do you want to add how you found your niche? You kind of
Yeah.
stepped slightly outside of the product experience that you have.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I was a product leader for 16 years, and I then pivoted into venture for 5 years. So I got to sort of be on both sides of the table, or seen sort of both sides of the table, and then I took my first COO role during the pandemic. But I told the founders I actually did not want to do product because I wanted to expand my experience and skill set into other things. And so when I started my fractional consulting practice, I recruited a business partner. I actually asked him, what do you want to build the practice around? And his niche was strategy and operations. And I'm like, okay, I can do anything. So sure, let's just focus on strategy and operations first as kind of like, what we would do branding and positioning of our consulting practice with. But exactly plus one to what Prerna said. Like what I learned is that you just need to get in front of founders, or entrepreneurs who are kind of earlier in the journey who might not already have like their entire executive team built out, and who who have help, because in the early days, I mean, there's a whole long laundry list of things that you need help with. And it's really having a conversation. Really, like I really think selling is not about selling yourself. It is trying to like be immensely curious about their businesses, right? So like really try to go and deeply understand their business and just have a really interesting, thoughtful conversation around their business, because in the process, you will start hearing like, yeah, what is, the biggest pain, or what keeps them up at night. And, so I mean, you can ask the question directly, which often do, just like Prerna, or you just listen and you'll hear the clues and the signals. And so sometimes like they'll say something, and then from your experience and expertise, you like can contribute, right? Ideas and advice, and and just really have an engaging conversation. Because if you can build that like credibility and that rapport and that interest in their business in the first conversation, they will want to continue to have a conversation with you. So I think selling is no more than that. It is not sales. It is like relationship building. It's curiosity. It's applying your knowledge and your experience into that conversation where you seem credible, where you seem also somebody who is likable and authentic, and somebody that they might want to work with. And then the second conversation can be a deep dive in terms of the specifics. But that's how I sort of approach selling. And like Prerna, I might go into a company trying to solve like one specific problem. And if you do a good job, there's no end to the amount of founder problems, or challenges or needs. Because again, all these early stage founders, they don't have their full executive teams in place. They can't even probably hire somebody as seasoned as you, in the early days. And so you will always find more work, or they will, if you're good, continue to, ask you to take on more and more and more things. So, for me and my business partner, I mean, we have founders that we've been working with almost since day one, just because they kind of keep us around forever, even though, like, in some cases, they've done multiple rounds of riffs. They've done multiple rounds of riffs and they still keep us. So that's kind of a crazy thing. But, but again, if you're good, founders always figure out a way to continue to work with you, to continue to like expand the engagement, etc. I'll leave that at that.
Tommi, any thoughts you want to add?
Yeah, a couple. I mean, part of me wants to take this back to the finding your niche because we already went right into the big meat of the like, hey, how do you sell? Which I'm sure we're going to talk a lot of this hour. But I do want to piggyback off something that both the ladies already said, which is like generally product people are really bad at sales, and we see this in kind of the sales product relationship, and we're always like, how do you fend off sales? Well, and so product people usually love to talk about the solution. Like, here's the thing we built, here's the widget, here's the thing. But like sales is so much more listening. It's about like learning about the problem. This like came really loudly from both my fellow panelists. Like, you really just need to like listen. I mean, we have all these sales tools that are like showing how much the salesperson talked in the meeting and giving bad marks on that. And it really is like getting sales is about being empathetic, learning, listening about the problem, and then eventually being able to position your product yourself as the solution. But like going back to the discovering your niche, I'm usually a walking don't do what I say or don't do what I do what I say kind of person where I going into this fractional thing, I had a very aggressively honed like the kind of definition of who I'm like. I had my ICP, I knew what I'm like, really good at, like better than most people down the street that had come through years and years of what I had done as a product person. I was like, my big thing is kind of startup to scale up flips. It's all about the early growth stage. How do you transform from a startup to scale up? And I had my ICP really defined like, okay, it's founders who are kind of hitting a brick wall around 10 million, 20 million. And I came out the gate selling that because I had been very successful doing that as a W-2 salaried employee. And then, as with fractional, often the world can take you in different directions. I started doing that. It was fine. My first 6 months was okay. I had contracts, I had gigs, it was all fun. But I started running into this problem where, like, when you're working with both Prerna and Ha mentioned founders as kind of the core client, I started getting really frustrated with founders, like selling to founders being a very almost like an exercise in futility because you'd never really get leverage to change a business if you sold to founders. Because unfortunately, founders usually bring you in a little too late with a little too little of a mandate. And I had started forming this hypothesis that actually I should probably be selling through boards and through VCs and PEs, which then led me to talk to a couple of private equity funds, just kind of testing the waters, like what could I kind of find a way as like an operating resource. And then one thing led to another, and I did a due diligence gig and somehow ended up being running the entire due diligence, like tech product, data and AI due diligence pump for a private equity fund. Something I hadn't even thought of, something that I had never even considered to be my niche. But most of 2025, I was living on Easy Street, making solid money on that side. So I don't know. I'm a horrible example of how to define your niche because I thought I had it all figured out, and then the winds of the world tossed me in a different direction.
Sounds like you all had a viewpoint on what you thought your strengths were and went to the market and listened to the market. And the market's kind of given you other opportunities and probably side opportunities. But one thing I'm hearing from all of you is you're really paying attention to your clients' needs and listening to them, kind of gaining those insights and then helping them in a very organic way instead of like being a salesy person. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. Here's what I'll say though, this is what's really interesting about this experience is like you kind of treat yourself, you are the product, right? And as
Yes.
product leaders, like what's really awesome about this, like we have the playbook, we've been building product for years and years. And so sometimes you just have to be like, how do you apply that playbook to yourself if you are the product? And a good example of this is like, yes, I've, been listening to clients, but there got to a point, especially with all of this AI hype, I got really excited about building and prototyping with AI. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, I remember like this time last year where I started like, hanging out on like V0 and like Lovable and like playing around me like this is crazy, game changing. And I was like, how can I get more into this? So like I already had my kind of offering that I'd already been working on, but I was like, okay, how do I test like a new revenue stream? Like how do I get into work that I'm still learning it and I'm still figuring it out. But how do I get into like this new niche? And so Ha said something that I think is really worth double clicking on, and she used the word authenticity. And I think it is so important to like, first of all, you shouldn't do anything that isn't already authentic to yourself. Like trying to sell something that you have like not a lot of experience in just because you think everyone else is selling into that is probably like the fastest path to like realizing that this is not right for you. But the way that like I built that authenticity for myself was actually building content. And what that meant was actually like talking about this thing that I'm really excited by, which is prototyping with AI tools and starting to build. I started with by building a course, and then I took that course, I built it into a workshop. I took that workshop, I built it into some talks that I've been giving at different product conferences, and like has there been like long-term work that's come out of it? No. And so I'll be really transparent about that. But it has meant that like I've actually had some conversations. I'm continuing to iterate on that offering. And I'm now getting paid to do those workshops, which is awesome. And in its own kind of like, we think about portfolio careers, that's kind of a cool way to, I guess, make money in a way that I hadn't thought was possible before getting on this path. All of this to say that like it's constant iteration, and you should look at the tools that you've gained as a product leader to continue working on how you might iterate your own offering, if that makes sense.
Sounds good, Prerna. We're going to
I'm going to give one more piece of advice
go
before
ahead,
we
go
go
ahead.
on.
Yes.
So my piece of advice is just like, what, like, why would a founder hop on a call with you, right? So what do you want to be known for, or what are you known for? And it should all be based on your past experience or an area of expertise. So, for example, like two of my first three clients, it was because they were marketplace startups, and I had been working in marketplaces almost my entire career. So, one of them came through a referral where like he was looking for a co-founder, and was talking to a friend, and he was building a local marketplace, and that friend said, "Oh, you should talk to Ha because Ha ran Swimply, which was a local marketplace, and so therefore, like yeah, I told that founder I wasn't going to start a business with him, but that like if he wanted to hire me, here's how I worked. But like another one, again, another founder engaged because they were building a marketplace and they saw that I had a ton of marketplace experience. A third one engaged because he was a solo founder and I had done a COO role, and then his VC introduced us because they were like, oh, well, Ha has kind of this wealth of experience and in building a business at the earliest days, and if you're a solo founder, you might enjoy chatting with her. So just think about those things. Like you should just be able to like bullet point. These are the three things that like I have expertise in. I want to be known for. I should be credible in, and just share those three things with everybody that you meet. Like, hey, I'm looking for, I'm going on this fractional path. I want to work with a few different founders. Think of me when ABC, right? Like, think of me when ABC. You want to share that with everybody in your network because then you're not going to get a ton of leads, but the few that you will, they'll just have remembered you said, oh, call on Ha when it's A, B, or C. And so that would be just sort of the advice I have. But yeah, I would not spend any time like building out like, a whole like brand thing, like a website. And none of that really matters. So, just like what's the three things you want to be known for that you tell everybody so that they keep you top of mind and hopefully introduce you to people and founders when they, say that they might need an expert in A, B, or C.
Like a
That's
real
actually let me
practical. Go
let me
ahead.
let me hop on that real quick because there's a couple of things you said, Ha, that like really ring true. And first of all, it's like the referral aspect, right? Like we always talk in these sessions about the biz dev and what a hustle it is to get gigs. Almost every experienced fractional that I speak to is that it is a cold start problem. But if by like year 2 or 3, most of your gigs don't come from like repeat purchases and direct referrals, something's going wrong. And the even more important point that Ha was really harping on there, it's like your brand is not what you say you are. Your brand is what other people tell other people what you are. And I think that's it's I like building like websites and whittling my LinkedIn and whatever, but it's less of a, hey, this is a resource that's going to get me all these gigs. It's more about like, can I practice in for myself to express who I am? And if I can't express it as a website, then I probably can't do it. But it's like it's more of a, can I arm myself to create a uniform message enough that kind of aligns with what Ha just said? Because end of day, if somebody you've worked with or interfaced with or met at a conference can't represent you accurately and excitingly, then chances are you don't have a brand.
Yeah. So a lot of this that we're talking about, thank you everyone for sharing, is really around how to create your brand, set up what people know you for, right? And so the next part of our conversation is really about packaging your offer. And so much of that is positioning and how you want to put yourself forward in the world. So I'd love to hear, if anyone is willing to share how you packaged your first offer, when you started working as a fractional consultant, how did you offer your services?
Do you want anyone specific of us to start off? Or
Go for it,
Whoever.
Tommy.
okay, I can. So I like positioning. I think that's often kind of the less appreciated part of kind of the product marketing aspect of product. So when I started out, I again did like an exercise of thinking through my engagement models and kind of again trying to be very producty about it, like not selling the solution but selling the problem and so forth. And if anybody, I've got some collateral that I wrote back then that I can send if anybody wants to hit me up on LinkedIn or whatever. But it was very much like kind of jobs to be done. Like, here is the scenario for you as a CEO or founder or whatever, and here is how I can solve that scenario. So it was less about like, buy me to do a project on X. It's more like, if you are in this situation, I've got the solution for you. And it defined broadly. And I saw on Slido that I have on in the other window, a lot of people are asking about pricing as well. Uh, Many experienced fractional leaders said, like, whatever you do, don't work on hourly rates and don't work on this kind of like, hours for dollars mindset. So I was very diligent about kind of packaging more kind of like value-based pricing. Like, hey, if you're in this situation, it's worth like, you can pay me 20 grand a month to be on a retainer and kind of help you as needed. Or, hey, I can run this type of project that's going to be worth $50,000 for you or whatever. So it was very much like value-based pricing. But of course, as like a new fractional, I had rooted it into some sort of like mental math of like, this will probably take me like 100 hours. So it'll probably have to be like my hurdle rate for making those hours make sense is like so and so much. But honestly, kind of going back to what Prerna and how we're saying, it really comes down to like being able to boil the things you can do incredibly well, and then reverse engineering from like common generic scenarios that a founder might find, because they're never thinking like, I need X. They're always thinking, I need to solve for Y. And if you have a opinionated enough but still kind of malleable product suite that you can kind of come to the table and be like, hey, clearly your situation is this, and so I can solve it this way, helps a lot. And that also helps a lot with the kind of pricing, because if you don't give a if you don't give any guidelines or any framework, they're always going to be like, so what do you charge per hour? And that's usually like a bad place to start from as a fractional. Um, and then, of course, again, from the category of like, don't do what I do, then I landed in the private equity world where the thought of somebody being a contractor that's not an hourly or daily rate is preposterous. So if anybody's ever interested, I can also bore you with details on that. And yeah.
Awesome. Ha or Prerna, want to add anything or?
No, I don't think it's a super interesting question. I think we move on. I think Tommy did a great job, and unless Prerna had something to add, but like, yeah, I'm a big believer in the retainer model. I'm a big believer actually of driving the process with founders because I actually hear a lot of people, who are new to fractional tell me that like I've now had 4 conversations with a founder, and now I'm bringing up like the pricing and the engagement model and now I'm hearing crickets. Well, I'm like, well, that's because you didn't define the process up front, right? Like, set the expectation in terms of this is how we're going to approach like if the first is just like get to know you, like build a relationship and the trust and the rapport. But if you're not in that first meeting, like being like what sales does, which is pre-qualify, has this person raised money? Do they have some level of a budget? And then this is how, the process works for us to decide whether to work together. You're not setting that expectation up front, then you're going to go through lots and lots of conversations with founders to realize that, oh, they can't afford to pay you, or they were just really using you for free advice and stuff like that. So I would just say that to me, gets away from your positioning question, but I just say like, you like have agency, you're doing this work, like you should have the attitude of like any founder would be so lucky to work with me. You're not going to say that in the meeting, but you're going to define your terms and your engagement and how you price, and either they say yay or they say no. And it's okay for people to say no, and it's okay for you to like turn away work if it doesn't, meet, the dollars per hour that you believe that you owe or you deserve. It's fine. Like,
Yeah.
move on,
If it's
find
not
another
then
founder.
I'll say
So
this, I think like it's like qualifying your ICP, and your ICP
that's
needs
right.
to be they can pay you.
They can pay you.
They can't pay you
And they can
there's
pay
like
you what you're worth.
worth. Exactly. Exactly. And I feel like I'm in total alignment. The other like sort of thing that I've, just as a practice that I've been doing is like every single client, I just charge more. I'm like, well, that was my last rate, and now this is my new rate. I think a solid piece of advice I got when I was like kind of just starting off and more actually around negotiating job offers, but now it's also true for fractional clients is like, if the number doesn't want to make you throw up as you say it, like then it's not enough. Like you have to like put yourself out there and like demand what you want. And guess what? I have been turned down by clients who are like, you know what? I actually respect, like, and I absolutely believe that that is what you should be paid. We just can't afford it. I'm like, great, awesome. I'm glad we had this conversation. And if you do end up having a funding round later where you can and you become more well capitalized, like, let's have that conversation later. This is not us like permanently shutting the door. It just means it's just like a deferred kind of decision. And so yeah, you'll see that too, and you kind of in your hit rate. But my kind of general philosophy is like, especially as I'm kind of like starting to max out, and like every hour now becomes even more valuable than, when if I had no work whatsoever.
nice. Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. I think that, the way that all of you have grown your practices, it's super inspiring. I'm curious, have you ever had an offer that didn't resonate, or you realized you needed to go back to the drawing board about based on what the market was telling you? And what did you do when you realized it was time to make a change?
I think for me, so it's kind of twofold. The one is like I couldn't agree more with the advice Ha was giving about leading early with the kind of terms, because especially right now, and especially if you're the kind of product leader who specializes in the very early stage companies, Woo you're going to have a lot of people waiting around behind your door to work on different kind of deferred payment or sweat equity deals. And like, again, if you want to gamble, you gamble, Powerball tickets are fun. But at the end of the day, it feels really, uh, it just feels wrong to work completely on deferred payment. And so that was one thing where I think early on when my calendar was still a little empty, I found myself talking to too many people who are like, well, could you work with us a little bit? And, once we raise our round, and I would categorically walk away from them unless there was something I really wanted to learn from that. The other part was kind of what I said earlier is um, I went back to the drawing board on my approach when I realized the majority of gigs that I had didn't have the enough leverage to have the impact or the change that I wanted. And for me, it was less of a changing my profile and more of like changing the way I approach the market and kind of who I sell through. Um, and kind of, yes, that led me down this weird side path and side quest that I'm on right now. But ultimately, was like an understanding of to maximize my impact, I had to sell to the boards and I had to sell to the BECs. And that was a very different type of relationship building. It was a very different approach to go to market than kind of the original, just try to kind of go through the product leaders or go through the founder CEOs.
I would love to move on to everyone's favorite topic, biz dev. How do we get clients? Um, would love to hear your perspective on what's really important when you're going about getting your first clients.
I think we've kind of covered this in the past, but I think to make a piece of advice that Ha had already given around like tell everyone you know about what you're doing. So assuming that you've already done the work to like the self-reflection on like what you're really good at and maybe done some discovery work to understand what clients are interested in, but like in between that is actually like how do you get in front of the people that you want to talk to? And Ha said tell everyone you know. I think concretely like a tactical thing here that it was I found really helpful was that I actually wrote down a list of like 20 people that know me really well, I've worked with before, could attest to like the quality of the work that I could like usually like have them be my ambassador, and we're also really well connected, and let them know. Like I was in a weird place where I didn't, for a lot of different reasons, I couldn't post on LinkedIn that I was doing this thing. But I knew that I wanted to like I wanted to tell people that I was doing this, and so that they could be advocates on my behalf and introduce me to people that they might know. And so that strategy was really, really helpful. And for me, that list also included, yeah, again, like people like colleagues that I had worked with before who had moved on to other roles, but were also like investors in companies, were advisors to other startups. This included like a CTO that I had worked with before. It included some VC firms that I've been building relationships with for a really long time through some community work, building like women in product here in New York City, and other partners that I've come across, and also founders I had kind of been working with before during COVID. So that was kind of my playbook when I was starting off in this particular kind of context. So that would be kind of like my biggest recommendation. And then the second thing that I kind of tried to some varying degree was actually looking at who was hiring for a VP of product in New York City and reaching out to them and being like, "Hey, I know you're hiring for a VP of product. I like first of all, I'd love to sort of send you some candidates." Like, and what's really nice is again, by building women in product here in New York City, like I have a really great roster of people to refer. So I'm like, I'm happy to refer, but also like, is there anything I can do to help in the interim as you're like, recruiting and because these things, especially if you're looking for higher exec positions, might take some time. And so that was kind of like my intro into being like, hey, I know you have this need immediately. Like, is there an opportunity here to do some consulting? So those would be my like two very tactical things that I would recommend if you're like, I don't even know where I would start with the people that you know. And if you want to do some cold outreach, look for the people that have clearly demonstrated that they have a need for this thing.
Well, I love your hack, Prerna. I think that's a brilliant hack, and I think everybody should try it and let me know if that works because I think it's a brilliant hack. I will say, and I'll tell you what I don't think works, at least from my experience. Um, so as you know, VCs are a great source for, founders because they have the whole portfolio. What I found was that anytime I got introduced to a new VC and I would share a little bit about myself and what I do, I never got a single referral, not a single one. And I think it goes back to what Prerna said, which is they're talking to people all the time. They will not remember you 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks from now. So unless you're really good and you have a CRM system where you're keeping in touch with them regularly, you're not going to probably get referrals from the source that you think is going to be your best source of referrals. But who does refer you? People who know you really well, have worked with you in some way, or interacted with you and can like vouch for you. But it could be like people who would just sort of doesn't have to be so strong like you work directly with them. It could be like you were a VP at a company, and you would occasionally get invited to board meetings. Well, you should reach out to those VCs, who are on the boards of the companies that you worked at, like, because they will have a sense of obligation to help you. Hopefully, they saw you at work, presenting something, or the CEO raved about you or whatever. They're gonna be the ones who will say yes to the meeting, will like really try to help you out, and send you, opportunities and just make sure that you're good at identifying those people, having the conversations, and then, regularly touching base with them, giving them updates and things like that. But yeah, I would say that like the things just that don't work are just like, yeah, ex telling people that you haven't built a relationship with and expecting them to send stuff your way. I will say though that back to the tell everybody I'm kind of surprised at like sometimes I get founder referrals when I least expect it. So I was uh having a networking conversation with another product leader, and I'm like, product leaders don't can't refer any founders or whatever, So I was just having a conversation. She was like, "What are you up to?" And I was like, "Here's what I'm up to." And she was like, "Oh, well, my husband just finished raising a round, and he's a founder, and I should introduce you." And he ended up becoming a client. So I do think that, like, while I wouldn't expect, um, that telling everybody is a great source of leads, I am pleasantly surprised that sometimes things just surprise you. Like when you tell somebody what you're up to and they didn't know that before, they're like, "Oh, I actually just spoke to this founder, or my husband is a founder," or whatever it is. And so that's where the telling everybody you go can sometimes surprise you.
So piling on the whole surprising, well, two things, right? I actually applied Prerna's hack quite successfully because when I was on the fence of should I actually just go for another tour of duty as a salaried employee or should I go fractional, I actually did the exact same thing. I was kind of half interestedly engaged in an interview for like a product leader at a company, and I was coming to a conclusion like I have no interest in joining this company permanently. And I just floated like, hey, what if like I actually knew the exact person that they needed to hire. I was like, why don't you hire this person and also contract me for like a couple days a week on retainer? And I'll because the person I was recommending was a couple of ticks more junior than they thought they were wanting to hire. And I was like, this combo would actually work really well. So I kind of sold my way into my first gig, which end of day, this is the whole biz dev question. It is a cold start problem. It is the worst at the beginning. It's the hardest thing is to begin. But the surprising and the kind of the annoying part is as a product person, as a systems thinker, I always want things to be very like, okay, I found my channel, I found my approach, this is what works. But if I retro my like first 5, 6 gigs, they all came from completely different sources, completely like um, one was through somebody who had just happened to be Finnish and had seen something I posted on LinkedIn and was like, hey, can you help us with this thing? One was like somebody my wife had met who needed somebody to help them kickstart a new venture. Uh, like they were all like, and some were like former colleagues. And it's like it's incredibly hard to kind of say like, well, if I just rinse and repeat this one motion, that's going to work. But the only unifying factor was basically, and this is the most annoying advice you're ever going to hear, is like start 10 years ago. Like almost all of them were like these weird offshoots of seeds I had sown and kind of half-assedly cultivated for years without any sort of like, ha ha ha, when 2024 rolls around, I'm going to cash in on this relationship. It was just like stuff that I had put out into the universe that just like reverberated over years and then suddenly sparked into a gig in 2024 or 2025. And so this is like really useless advice in terms of like what can you go and do and repeat that will make you have success as a fractional. But I do think like I agree with Ha and Prerna, like sometimes the sources can surprise you, and if you haven't put in the labor to almost like create opportunities for luck and serendipity to happen, it's not going to happen because it's not just going to be like, oh, I hope somebody comes and gets me for a fractional gig. It like you have to put in the hours and the work to create the relationships and then not be afraid to ask.
I think it, so this is where I think fractional isn't right for everybody, and especially if if you don't feel like you have that network, I would say like it is a much more challenging problem. What's really interesting to me is like I agree with you. Like my first five clients came from every different which way. What I've seen and noticed is that like especially if you're like later on in your fractional product, I think you said this too. It's like you're it becomes a lot more referral based, and like what I'm really seeing success in right now is I specifically like design referrals. So like I have now worked with clients who needed design help. I have like a design partner who runs his own design agency, and I've been referring him work to the clients that I've been working, and now he's like now referring me to people that his clients, and so we kind of have a co-referral agreement, if you will. And actually, I'm starting to develop that with engineering, marketing, and other different disciplines. And so that's where the BD pipeline has really started to pick up, is when you can actually, outside of product, build, referral partnerships with different functions. Because likely when you go into a client, the needs are so vast, and the product isn't the only thing they likely need. And that's really been effective for me kind of in the later stage of like sort of in the maturity of a fractional practice.
Thank you, guys. We'll go into the Q&A section. There's been a lot of questions that are coming up. There's at least 18 questions that have been posted. Thank you so much for everyone posting questions. But quite a few questions have already been answered, so I'm going to go and pick ones that have not been answered. There's one that sounds really interesting. How have you been setting boundaries for how deep you get into the problem set, and how would seem a challenging area to manage? Because as a, fractional, like how do you decide where to go deep and where to kind of stay at a high level?
Yeah, I
Go
guess
ahead,
I
huh?
can start.
Yeah.
I mean, again, you have to just realize that you set the terms. The founder's not setting the terms for you. And so, like, I think early on, I was like, well, I don't want to join any meetings for the sake of joining meetings. Like, it's kind of a waste of my time. So I don't join, if there's like company all hands meetings, I always get invited to them. I don't join. If there's like a recurring, like, weekly sales meeting or something like that, I just don't join. What I do want to make sure is that I have a weekly call with the founder CEO, where I'm providing updates, I'm getting the necessary information I need from them. I'm asking them for, resources if I don't have it, context if I don't have it, etc. I think that's super important. And then you're just communicating out, like, like what meetings you will engage in, what things, don't make sense for you to engage in. I think you can easily make it very clear, which is, it's probably not worth like, you spending the money on me, taking on, this piece because it's not the highest leverage for you, or attending this meeting where, it's probably not the best use of, the allotted time together. So there's definitely ways where you can position it, which is like making them realize, oh yeah, like, like, yeah, don't get involved in that. I really need you in these areas. And so so that's just super high level. I don't think we need to go so much into detail in that, like, I mean, you are working for yourself and you're setting the terms and you figure out the highest leverage work that you can do. As long as you have a great relationship with the founder CEO, or, whoever hired you in, and you have regular communication and touch points and transparency, and they're going to be fine with it. And
I
so,
think the question for you though, I think like what you describe is a little bit different than what I do, but I think
hmm.
what you describe is like that the nature of the engagement that you take on is at like this like higher level like coaching advisory practice. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No,
No?
fractional too. Yeah,
Okay.
fractional too. Yep. No, just that, there's always, and this is what always drove me nuts, like, as an operator, which is there's always these meetings on the calendar in the books, but it's like, actually, just send me the
Yeah.
notes, send me the
Mhm.
slide deck. Like, I got
Yeah.
all, I don't need to be in an hour, 1 hour meeting. like like I just need the high level and then I'm fine. So you
Yeah.
just have to figure out where you can buy your time back being a fractional that you couldn't buy back like being an operator, right? An operator, like you're expected to, build rapport with every single team member and build the culture and be present and, and stuff like that. I don't think you need to do certain things as a fractional consultant.
Yeah, of course, like your mileage may vary, right? Like depending on your engagement model, and
Yeah.
if you're like an executive advisor versus interim CTO versus fractional
Of
CP, like
course. Yes.
they'll
Of
it
course.
depends heavily. And like I think how your point at the very end there, which was like kind of does the role you're playing require things like building social capital? Well, most of the time, a fractional really doesn't. Especially if you're kind of on the advisory slash fractionals, like true fractional CPO uh, role, then or kind of supplementing some temporary hole in the leadership team. Absolutely not. But there are some transitional scenarios where I do throw myself into the whole like, hey, let me go like do the weekly team all hands to kind of build a little more credibility into me as a
Mhm.
human being. But I generally align with how on like you do want to be somewhat stingy on your time because it
Yeah.
is an investment on the teams or on the company's side.
I think the way that I've looked at it is that like I have one, and this is kind of also you think about it as a portfolio. So if you have more than one client, there's like some portfolio management you end up having to do. So I have what I call like my whale client, which is like the kind of my anchor of like, okay, this is like the client that I actually spend the most amount of my time with and have really invested in building relationships and doing that relationship management. And then the other sort of clients I kind of like fill around that are a lot more on the advisory side of like, hey, I come in once a week, I talk to them, I'm guiding them, like even in this like client that I'm about to roll off, like in the last few months, I'm like, hey, I think you guys need some founder coaching. Let me help like source that for you. Hey, I think you need to find a new marketing agency. Let me source that for you. And so it depends on the kind of type of engagement, but I would say like it would not be possible for me to do like multiple fractional roles like that. I think like that's just my perspective. Like I think what's been really nice is like I have one fractional role and then a couple advisory roles that
Mhm.
Yeah.
allow me to really balance my time and not feel like I have to attend every single meeting or where I attend meetings where I'm again really deeply invested in the team. And then for everything else, like really creating boundaries around like this is a coaching and advisory practice. And this is what you get.
Yeah. Prerna, one thing that you said that I want to hone in on that's off topic, is one of the most valuable, one of the ways you can be most valuable to founders that you're working with is to build up an extremely big network. So of course, having a big network is great because, you probably will likely see more deals or, get more opportunities that way. But, founders, like especially, earlier in the journey or new, first time or second time founders even, it's like what they don't have is they don't have the networks, right? So it's like
Yeah.
if you can introduce them to other investors, amazing, other advisors, amazing, potential employee candidates, amazing, potential customers, amazing, right? Like the more that you can build your network and add value even outside of the scope of like what you're doing, that's like high leverage, right? Like it takes me no time to like make introductions and yet it's so valuable for them and it took so little time for me. And it's like, well, of course they're going to want to keep me forever because I know like, I have like the network, right? And so that's just my piece of advice of like kind of back to what Tommy was saying, like starting like 10 years ago. It's like it is never too late to build your network and you can never do too much of it. So just something there just to all think about.
No, sounds good. I mean, I'm trying to build out a network of engineers and designers because when someone needs someone, you're there to like say, yes, I know this person and I vouch for them and we can get them started. And it has been helpful in just like, building trust and relationships. Um, one more question. I think we have maybe just time for one more question. Do we think we have time, Dina?
Well, we do want to get to the feedback form, so that would.
Okay. I guess then we're gonna close the Q&A right here. I think the panel has actually answered a lot of the questions that have come up in the Slido. We will share all the insights that we've gathered today. This was a wonderful discussion. I want to thank Prerna, Ha, and Tommi for like an amazing deep dive into the space. And Dina, back to you to let's talk about the feedback and.
Oh, I went ahead and put the feedback form in the chat. It would really help the organizers to hear more about what's interesting for you and what other kinds of content you'd like to see. So please take some time now before your next meeting to fill that out. And feel free to connect on LinkedIn, join us on Slack. We can continue the conversation. And we'll send out the slides to everyone who attended on Luma.
Sounds good.
Anything else from you, Rana?
No, I was just going to say Dina and I are also on the fractional journey, advisory and fractional journey. She runs a company called Chillaborate, which is kind of fun. She believes in working in a chill manner. And she has a master's from MIT. And I'm beginning to run a product advisory called True North. Just doing fractional right now, but also beginning to get some advisory positions as well. So all of this information was very pertinent. And there were areas that I was thinking about, like pricing packaging, for instance. Setting terms was very important. How do you work with founders is important. How do you figure out your niche is important. So this was a great conversation. And feel free to reach out if any of you who are joining here, if you'd like to have a conversation with us, feel free to reach out to Dina, me, or any of our panelists.
Well, thanks, everyone. Thanks for having us. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll stay on a few minutes.